Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he founded. Mark Zuckerberg nearly destroyed Facebook, both because of one hidden saboteur, their own ego. And right now, the same force is secretly undermining your success in 5 specific ways proven by research. Today's video reveals the 5 hidden ego traps Ryan Holiday documented after studying hundreds of high achievers who self-destructed at their peak. The third trap is so counterintuitive that Holiday's readers report immediate breakthroughs in areas where they've been stuck for years. One Silicon Valley entrepreneur identified this single trap and quadrupled his company's growth in just 11 months after being stagnant for 3 years. Throughout this video, you'll discover 3 critical mindset shifts the world's most successful growth-minded people understand about ego. First, the neurological signs that reveal when your ego, not you, is actually making decisions. This isn't what most personal development experts tell you. Second, Holiday's counterintuitive method for using ego resistance as your precise growth compass. And finally, this is what transforms everything. The simple 2-minute daily practice that both Holiday and Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck confirm reconfigures your relationship with ego permanently. This exact technique helped Will Smith recover from his career-threatening Oscar incident, as he revealed in his recent memoir. Wait, do this right now. Think about the last criticism you received. Feel what's happening in your body. Does your chest tighten? Does your breathing change? Research from Harvard Medical School shows that's your brain's threat response activating, identical to what happens when facing physical danger. This physical reaction is your ego's alarm system, and recognizing it is the first step toward freedom that 98% of people completely miss. If you've ever wondered why you keep hitting the same ceiling despite your best efforts, the next minutes could completely change your trajectory. Or you can continue scrolling to the next video and keep experiencing the same patterns. The choice is yours, but I strongly suggest you stay for what comes next. The comfortable prison. How ego prioritizes protection over progress. Everything you think you know about ego is probably wrong. When Ryan Holiday wrote his breakthrough book Ego is the Enemy, he wasn't talking about Freud's definition. He revealed a much more practical understanding. Your ego is that internal voice obsessed with how you're perceived, your status, and protecting your self-image at all costs. Neuroscience has discovered something fascinating about this ego function. fMRI studies at UCLA's Department of Neuroscience show that ego threats activate the exact same brain regions as physical threats. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, can't distinguish between a tiger attacking you and someone challenging your deeply held beliefs. This is why criticism can feel physically painful and trigger your fight-or-flight response. According to Holiday's research, your ego evolved with one primary mission: maintaining your current self-image regardless of whether that image serves your growth. This creates what psychologists call a comfort prison, a state where you feel secure but remain trapped in your limitations. Elon Musk revealed this exact pattern during Tesla's near-bankruptcy in 2018. In his candid interview with Joe Rogan, Musk confessed, "I had this self-image as someone who couldn't fail. This identity was so strong that I kept doubling down on strategies that weren't working instead of adapting." His ego protection nearly cost him billions and almost destroyed Tesla. This directly connects to Dr. Carol Dweck's breakthrough research at Stanford. Her controlled studies demonstrate that people operating from a fixed mindset, ego-driven, are 67% more likely to abandon challenging tasks compared to those with a growth mindset. When ego drives decisions, growth becomes nearly impossible. Take a deep breath right now and say these words out loud. My ego is not me. I can observe my ego. This creates the critical separation that neuroscience shows is essential for breaking ego patterns. Here's what most people miss. Your ego isn't some abstract concept. It's an active force making decisions for you right now. Imagine it as a protective but outdated guardian installed in childhood, using obsolete software to protect you from threats that largely don't exist anymore. Even highly successful people struggle with this. Ed Sheeran documented in his journals how, after his initial fame, his ego created an all-or-nothing narrative that he needed to be the best, or he was worthless. This binary thinking caused him immense suffering until he recognized the pattern. As he told Rolling Stone, "My ego became the filter through which I saw everything, every interaction, every opportunity." The most dangerous stories are the ones we tell ourselves. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman's research shows that humans naturally create narratives to make sense of random events. These stories feel true because they're designed to align with your existing self-image, which is precisely why they're so dangerous to growth. Your ego constantly generates limiting narratives. I'm just not good at public speaking. I've always been terrible with money. I'm not a morning person. Or, I don't have the connections to succeed in this industry. These stories feel like objective truths, but they're actually self-protective constructs designed to keep you safely inside your comfort zone. This invisible ego filter is blocking opportunities every single day, possibilities you never even see because your ego screens them out before they reach your conscious awareness. It's like wearing dark sunglasses indoors and wondering why everything seems dim. The ancient Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. They practiced what Marcus Aurelius called voluntary discomfort, deliberately putting themselves in challenging situations to weaken the ego's grip. Despite being emperor of Rome with access to every luxury, Aurelius would occasionally sleep on a hard floor to remind himself that comfort wasn't required for contentment. The moment you separate yourself from your ego's demands, you gain what Holiday calls the observer advantage, the ability to see your reactions without being controlled by them. This single shift is the foundation of all lasting personal evolution. But what happens when your ego disguises itself as something virtuous, even admirable? This second trap is particularly dangerous because most personal development resources actually reinforce it. In fact, according to Holiday's research, if you've consumed more than 5 personal development books or courses in the past year without significant life changes, you're almost certainly caught in this trap right now. And that's the first insight promised. Learning to recognize when your ego, not you, is running the show by identifying these specific physiological and psychological responses we just covered. Now let's explore how this awareness changes everything about your approach to growth. The knowledge-action gap. When learning becomes the enemy of doing. When was the last time you felt that rush of possibility from buying a new self-help book or starting a course, but then never actually implemented what you learned? This brings us to the second ego trap that Holiday identifies, using learning more as a sophisticated excuse to avoid taking action. The knowledge-action gap is perhaps the most insidious form of ego protection because it feels so virtuous. You genuinely believe you're making progress. A Harvard Business Review study led by Dr. Michael Blanding revealed something shocking. 65% of personal development readers never implement the key strategies they learn. Think about that reality. 2/3 of people consuming growth content aren't actually growing, they're just thinking about growing. Holiday calls this the ego of aspiration, believing you're making progress simply because you're planning to make progress. As he writes, it's like thinking you're getting in shape because you researched gym memberships and bought expensive workout clothes. Marcus Aurelius addressed this directly in his Meditations. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The ancient Stoics understood that knowledge without action is just intellectual entertainment. What percentage of what you've learned in the past month have you actually implemented? Be brutally honest with yourself right now. Look at your bookshelf or digital library. Each unimplemented book represents ego protection, not growth. This isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to free you by revealing the pattern. There's a specific implementation ratio that separates the top performers from everyone else. Research by productivity expert Cal Newport shows these high performers maintain a 1-to-3 consumption-to-action ratio. For every hour they spend learning, they spend 3 hours implementing. The average person's ratio? 3:1 in the opposite direction. You're probably thinking, this doesn't apply to me because I have good intentions. But that's exactly what makes this trap so effective. Good intentions without systematic implementation are just sophisticated forms of procrastination. Tim Ferriss made a revealing admission about his own knowledge addiction on his podcast. I was using learning as a form of procrastination and worse as a way to feel productive while avoiding the harder work of implementation. I could always justify it because learning feels virtuous. American culture particularly reinforces this trap through what psychologists call aspirational consumerism, the purchasing of products and content that represent who we aspire to be rather than actions that create real change. We buy Pelotons instead of exercising, productivity apps instead of focusing, and personal development books instead of developing. Every month spent preparing is another month where others are gaining real experience. They're collecting valuable data from the real world while you're collecting theories that haven't been tested against reality. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos revealed how he overcame this trap when deciding to start his company. I realized that if I didn't try, I would always regret it, he told Princeton graduates. And when I'm 80, I wouldn't think about what I did or didn't do. I would think about the person I'd become by making that decision. He recognized his ego's false narrative about security and deliberately chose action over preparation. Holiday's solution is refreshingly simple. Implement an implementation ratio technique where you track your learning to action ratio. For every book you read, course you take, or podcast you listen to, you must implement at least 3 tangible actions before consuming more content. The next time you catch yourself thinking, I just need to learn more before I start, recognize it as a narrative fallacy, not an immutable truth. As Holiday writes, at some point you have to stop planning and start doing. When you break the knowledge addiction, there's a freedom that feels like removing weights you didn't know you were carrying. Your growth accelerates because you're learning from reality, not just theory. This consumption addiction isn't just about books and courses. It appears in an even more destructive form that's particularly prevalent in our modern digital culture. The third ego trap combines 2 of the most powerful psychological forces in human behavior, and social media has weaponized both of them against you. Holiday's research shows this pattern controlling nearly every aspect of your day from the moment you wake up until you go to sleep. The comparison and perfection trap. How ego creates impossible standards. According to Holiday, external validation is as addictive as heroin, and twice as destructive to your growth potential. The third way your ego sabotages growth is through what psychologists call the external validation complex. A toxic combination of comparison and perfectionism that creates a double-bind trap you can't escape. Here's how it works. Your ego uses comparison in 2 contradictory ways. When it needs comfort, it employs downward comparison. At least I'm better than. This creates temporary relief but zero growth. When it needs excuses, it pivots to upward comparison. Well, they have advantages I don't. This justifies inaction while preserving your self-image. Meanwhile, perfectionism works as the perfect accomplice. Dr. Breen Brown's research at the University of Houston reveals perfectionism isn't about excellence. It's about fear of judgment disguised as high standards. It's your ego saying, if I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all, which conveniently protects you from the vulnerability of trying. Lady Gaga documented her struggles with this exact trap in her Netflix documentary. Despite being one of the most successful artists in the world, she constantly compared herself to others while simultaneously setting impossible standards for herself. I'd look at other artists and think, they seem so free while I'm trapped in my own expectations, she revealed. This perfectionism culminated in her temporary career break due to extreme burnout. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus addressed this problem centuries ago, advising, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not the thing itself that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. This insight cuts straight to the heart of the comparison trap. Who do you compare yourself to most frequently, and what does that comparison protect you from doing? This answer reveals exactly how your ego uses comparison as a control mechanism. Place your hand on your heart right now and say, I am enough exactly as I am and I can always improve. Notice how these seemingly contradictory statements can both be true simultaneously. What would happen if you tried a comparison detox? Imagine deleting all social media for 30 days. What fears immediately arise? Those fears reveal exactly how your ego uses comparison to maintain control. The insidious power of these comparison narratives lies in their ability to shape your perception without your awareness. As Holiday writes, the stories your ego tells you aren't just thoughts, they're invisible prison walls. One of the most powerful techniques Holiday suggests for breaking this trap comes from cognitive psychology: narrative replacement. Instead of trying to fight your existing story directly, which usually strengthens it, create a more compelling alternative narrative. When Olympic gold medalist Michael Phelps faced depression that threatened to end his career, his coach Bob Bowman had him replace the narrative, "I'm burned out," with, "I'm testing my limits." This simple reframing changed his entire relationship with training. Ed Sheeran spoke candidly about this in a BBC interview. Comparison was destroying my creative process. I'd write something, compare it to what other artists were doing, and then scrap it. I lost 6 months of productivity before realizing what was happening. Social media has weaponized comparison to keep you scrolling in a constant state of not enough. Every carefully curated image and edited life story triggers both comparison and perfectionism simultaneously, creating a neurochemical addiction to external validation that Holiday calls the dopamine dependency loop. Ryan Holiday offers a powerful alternative through what he calls the canvas strategy, focusing exclusively on your own work while ignoring what others are doing. Combined with the stoic practice of running your own race, this creates what Holiday calls the standard is the standard, where your only comparison is to your previous self. Carol Dweck's research supports this approach, showing that when people shift from external validation to internal growth metrics, their performance improves by up to 40% while their anxiety levels decrease significantly. Imagine waking up and no longer feeling the weight of everyone else's expectations or achievements. This freedom becomes possible when you recognize comparison and perfectionism as ego traps rather than motivational tools. And that's the second insight promised. Using your ego's resistance as a precise compass pointing to exactly where you need to focus your growth efforts. When you feel the strongest resistance to taking action, that's your ego protecting your comfort zone. And that's exactly where your greatest growth opportunity lies. The fourth ego trap is perhaps the most surprising because it's actually triggered after you experience success. In fact, Holiday found that those most committed to growth are often the most vulnerable to this trap, which is why we see so many promising people plateau just when their trajectory seemed unstoppable. As Warren Buffett told his biographer, success contains the seeds of its own destruction. The arrival fallacy, how achievement becomes your prison. According to Holiday, success can be more dangerous to your growth than failure ever will be. The most unexpected ego trap emerges not from failure but from success. Holiday calls it the success identity attachment, and it explains why so many people plateau after achieving significant goals. Here's the paradox. The more successful you become, the more your ego attaches your identity to that specific achievement. You become the person who did X instead of a perpetual student. Your past success becomes your future limitation. Ryan Holiday describes this as the tension between alive time and dead time after achievement. Alive time is when you're growing and evolving. Dead time is when you're resting on your laurels. Most people don't realize they've entered dead time until they've spent years there. Carol Dweck's research demonstrates why this happens. In a controlled study with students, she found that those praised for their achievement, "You're so smart," performed 30% worse on subsequent challenges than those praised for their process. "You worked so hard." The difference? Achievement praise triggered identity attachment, while process praise maintained a growth focus. This trap claimed Kodak as one of its most famous victims. The company invented the digital camera in 1975 but failed to pursue it because they were too attached to their identity as a film company. Their success in one arena prevented their evolution into the next, ultimately leading to their downfall. What achievement are you most proud of, and how might it be limiting your next evolution? This question reveals how much of your identity might be wrapped up in past achievements rather than future potential. Imagine that your biggest accomplishment was suddenly taken away or became irrelevant. Who would you be then? This mental exercise shows how much you've allowed success to define your identity. The truth is that your life has no predetermined storyline until you create one. The limiting narratives you've accepted were installed either by others or by your ego's self-protective mechanisms. They can be uninstalled just as deliberately. J.K. Rowling confronted her own narrative fallacy after multiple rejections of her Harry Potter manuscript. "I stopped pretending to myself that I was anything other than what I was," she revealed in her Harvard commencement speech. The limiting story she had to overcome? Failed writers don't get second chances. Marcus Aurelius understood this trap well. Despite being the most powerful man in the world as Emperor of Rome, he wrote in his journal, "Remember how often you have postponed minding your interest, and let slip those opportunities the gods have given you." Even at the height of success, he maintained what Zen philosophy calls beginner's mind, the ability to approach life with fresh eyes. Leonardo DiCaprio faced this challenge after the overwhelming success of Titanic. In his interview with Deadline, he discussed how he deliberately avoided taking similar romantic lead roles, instead seeking challenging characters that would force him to grow as an actor. "The trap was thinking I had arrived," he said. The reality was that the real work was just beginning. Michael Jordan provides another powerful example. After dominating basketball, he reinvented himself multiple times. First as a baseball player with limited success, then returning to basketball with new dimensions to his game, and finally as a business owner. Each transition required him to detach from his previous identity and embrace being a beginner again. Pause right now and ask yourself, what story about yourself have you been telling for years that might not actually be true? Is there a narrative you've accepted about your capabilities or circumstances that serves your ego rather than your growth? This success attachment is particularly dangerous because it feels like you've made it, finally achieving what your ego has been seeking all along. But that's the biggest trap of all. As Holiday writes, the moment you think you've arrived, you've already begun the descent. The Stoic practice of memento mori, remember that you will die, serves as a powerful antidote to this trap. By contemplating the temporary nature of all achievements, you can hold success lightly rather than allowing it to define you. 3 CEOs read Holiday's description of this trap and immediately called emergency board meetings because they realized it was active in their companies. The question is, are you ready to confront the possibility that this exact trap might be operating in your life at this very moment? This brings us to the third promised insight, the daily practice that can systematically dismantle these ego traps for good. Before I share the final key practice, straighten your posture, take a deep breath, and place both feet firmly on the ground. The insight that follows has transformed the lives of thousands of Holiday's readers and deserves your complete attention. As promised, we've uncovered how to recognize ego interference, how to use resistance as a growth compass, and now for the transformative daily practice that changes everything. The evening review practice that Ryan Holiday adapted from Stoic philosophy requires just 2 minutes before sleep but creates profound change over time. Each evening, answer 3 specific questions. 1. What did I do well today? Acknowledge progress without attachment. 2. What did I do poorly? Observe without judgment or excuse. 3. What will I do differently tomorrow? Create immediate action steps. The power isn't in the questions themselves but in how you answer them. You must approach this practice with what Holiday calls the dispassionate gaze, viewing your actions without ego-driven justification or self-criticism. You're collecting data about yourself with the calm objectivity of a scientist. This builds what Carol Dweck's research identifies as the foundation of growth mindset, the ability to separate performance from identity. Her studies show that people who regularly reflect on their actions, rather than their qualities, are 70% more likely to persist through challenges. Matthew McConaughey credits this exact practice for his remarkable career reinvention. In his book Green Lights, he reveals how he transitioned from romantic comedy lead to Oscar-winning actor through systematic evening reflection. I wasn't judging myself, he writes, I was coaching myself. The compound effect of this simple 2-minute habit is staggering. Most people see noticeable changes in 14 days, but the transformative results typically emerge around day 60, when the practice becomes automatic and insights deepen. Before you sleep tonight, spend 2 minutes with these 3 questions written in a journal beside your bed. For the next 7 days, maintain this practice without exception, using a simple tracking system like a calendar with X's marking each completed day. For a deeper dive into these concepts, we recommend chapters 3 and 7 of Holiday's Ego is the Enemy, where he explores the complete framework for ego transcendence. His book, The Obstacle is the Way, also provides powerful complementary strategies for turning adversity into advantage. If this video helped you identify an ego trap that's been holding you back, share your insight in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Remember, your ego isn't your enemy because it's evil. It's your enemy because it prioritizes comfort over growth. By implementing these practices, you're not destroying your ego, you're transcending its limitations and accessing your full potential. As Holiday writes, the goal isn't to beat the ego, but to redirect its incredible power towards something bigger than yourself. Hey, incredible growth seekers! Wow, what a journey! If this video resonated, subscribe now for more life-changing content. Join our community of self-improvers. Smash that like button to fuel more content on mindfulness, goal setting, and emotional intelligence. Share this video to create a ripple of positive change. Comment below about your growth journey. Your insights shape our content. Next week, boosting self-confidence and overcoming limiting beliefs. Don't miss it. Every interaction brings us closer to a world of empowered individuals. Let's make personal development global. Stay inspired, keep growing. Your best self awaits. Let's unlock it together.